Hi guys. Well, everything on the truck's working pretty good now. Do have one issue, and that is when I leave the truck sit for about a week or so, then it's really hard to start. You have to crank it and crank it and crank it until the fuel pump fills up the carburetor fuel bowl so you have enough gas for the engine to run. So I decided to add an electric fuel pump. So there are lots of options when you go this route. Um, One, you can just use the electric fuel pump to fill up the float bowl and then shut it off. The other is you can run the electric fuel pump continuously. In that case, you still have some options. You can run it directly through the mechanical pump. An issue there is if the diaphragm tears on the mechanical pump, you'll fill the crankcase full of fuel, which isn't that great an idea. You can bypass the mechanical fuel pump and just use the electrical, or you could run both mechanical and the electrical in parallel, and that would require, of course, check valves on both lines to make sure you just don't start flowing backwards through one of the lines. In any case, any of the electrical fuel pumps running continuously really need a shut-off of some sort. And that's if you get in an accident and the engine stops, you don't want the electric fuel pump to just keep flowing fuel and possibly spilling it all over the place with obvious hazards of fire or explosion. So that's typically done with hooking the electric fuel pump with a shutoff related to your oil pressure switch or your tach signal, the two most common. In any case, I decided to go with just fill the float bowl and then turn it off. And the reason I did that is the mechanical pump's working fine, and I kind of like the simplicity of it all. You just turn the electric off and the fuel flows through it, and basically it's just like you're running the mechanical without any electrical fuel pump. That being said, when you choose the electric fuel pump, you really need to pick one that is flow through. That is, when the pump is not operating, it still allows flow through the pump uninhibited. Actually had a electric fuel pump left over from a previous project. This is a faucet cylindrical type fuel pump, which is quite reliable and widely used in this application. And it's a negative ground, 12 volt positive. It should suit the purpose perfectly. So here's a still shot with a little bit better resolution, clearly showing the model number of the pump as 476087. This pump is a low pressure pump with a maximum pressure of 5.5 psi, range of 4 to 5.5, flows 36 gallons per hour, and has an ability to lift 24 inches. So this is a good pump for this particular use. All right, here's where the fuel comes out from the tank. It's underneath the truck. And that hose hooks up to the line going to the mechanical fuel pump. The lower line is the brake line, and it drops down here. So this will be a good spot to put the pump. It'll fit in very nicely. So that's how we're going to mount it right there. Okay, so now you can see we've used a clamp to prevent any leaks while we cut the tubing and make room for the electric fuel pump. And we'll just leave that clamp on until we're ready to hook it up. Okay, we're committed now. Okay, we've got the hoses hooked up, got the clamps on.
nothing's leaking out, so I think we're in good shape. Next test will be just to drive it, make sure that the mechanical fuel pump does pull through this one without any issues before we worry about wiring this one up. So here you can see we used little straps to strap the wire to the fuel line and route it up to the engine compartment. And here it goes up through a little hole in the channel iron up alongside of the firewall. And here you can see where the wire goes in through the sheath and in through the firewall next to the heater. Here's a wire coming in through the firewall in the cabin, routed behind the heater and ready to be hooked up to the switch. Okay, and inside the cab we're going to mount a momentary on switch right below the heater motor on switch right here, and there's lots of room there, yeah, it's going to be a momentary on switch because remember we're only using this fuel pump for priming. Okay, so we've got the button mounted where we said we were gonna, and it's mounted right close to the cigarette lighter. So we took power off of that line, which is both fused and hooked up to the ignition switch. So in the off position, when pushing the button does nothing. Next, we'll turn on the ignition and hold down the momentary on push button, and you should be able to hear the pump in the background going full speed. And then as the float bowl fills, the float will rise and close off the valve, allowing fuel in, and the pump will slow down to a stop. At that point, we'll let go of the button and start it up. The truck has been sitting for about a week, so let's see what happens. Fired right up, just the way it's supposed to.